Feel free to start the meeting.
Right, thank you, David. Right, good afternoon, everyone. We will start with the agenda. Are there any apologies, David? Oh, is it Anne taking?
Anne has gone.
So
no, we don't have any apologies,
right,
Chair. Just to note that this is a virtual meeting of the licensing subcommittee. It's being streamed live on YouTube. So everybody that we need to, apart from the administrator, is present, but we're running on YouTube currently. So we've got no apologies.
Right, thank you. I have no matters of urgency. Have any of the councillors got any declarations of interest? Pecuniary,
no, Chair.
or personal? Councillor Bundy, Councillor Lee. Right, thank you. We have no members of the public present. So we will then go on to the reports. Now, the procedure will be, you can see my name, Councillor Margaret Talbot. I'm chairing the meeting this afternoon. I shall be assisted by Councillor Lloyd Bundy and Councillor Anne Lee. And we will commence with the first report, which is an application for the review of the premises licence in relation to Aqua Nightclub. We will have a report from Mr. Howell and from Hazel Webb, our Community Services Manager. And then there will be the chance for Mr. Tolfacer to reply, and to Mr. Hobbs on behalf of Aqua Nightclub. And then there will probably be some questions from ourselves, the councillors, and we are being assisted this afternoon by Anne-Marie Walton Miller, who's the Kettering Borough Council legal representative. Right, so Mr. Khalil will be in the waiting room because that is to do with Alma's Express.
Just going to pop him in the waiting room, Chair.
Right.
Whenever Russ is ready, I think.
Right, okay, and we'll ask Mr. Howell to give, and for Hazel Webb as well, to give their report concerning Aqua Nightclub. Thank you, Mr. Howell.
Thank you, Chair. On this occasion, I've got nothing to say at the moment. In accordance with the guidance of the Licensing Act, as the licensing authority, myself has submitted this review. Hazel's responsible for the presentation of this report to the committee.
Right, okay. Thank you, Community Services Manager, Hazel Webb.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The committee is here this afternoon to consider the application for the review of the premises licence in relation to the Aqua Nightclub in Kettering. Kettering Borough Council, as the licensing authority, has submitted the application for review of the premises licence under the Licensing Act 2003 in relation to the Aqua Nightclub on Gold Street, Kettering, which is in Appendix A. Included in the report is the current licence, which is Appendix B, and a street plan which shows the location of the premises in Appendix C. The review application has been out to consultation for 28 days as required by the Licensing Act 2003, and no other representations have been received. In summary, this review application is the result of information obtained as a result of action taken under coronavirus legislation in August 2020. Investigations into that matter identified that in March 2020, the director of Rockefellers Limited had changed from Mr. Taller, who was and is the designated premises supervisor for the premises, to Mr. Priest. A change in directors does not need to be notified to the licensing authority. As designated premises supervisor is required by legislation to hold a personal licence and therefore must have some licensing knowledge. Mr. Priest does not hold a personal licence. Mr. Priest, we understand, is Mr. Priest, we understand, is an accountant in Corby. No contact has been had with Mr. Priest throughout this process, as we are unable to locate him. The registered office for the company is the nightclub premises. As no response had been received to a coronavirus warning letter served on the registered office address, when we served the notice under the coronavirus legislation at the premises, we also served a copy at Mr. Taller's home address in Northampton as given on his personal licence the same afternoon. We were contacted by Mr. Taller the day after the notice was served. We received an email from Mr. Taller using the email address of Mr. Daniel Tolvesa, who is the proprietor and licensee of Stereo in Northampton. The email is included in the review application. Appendix D is a copy of the extract from the individual insolvency register, which shows that in May 2020, Mr. Taller claimed to be unemployed and living in Kettering. Mr. Taller currently holds a personal licence under the Licensing Act 2003 at his Northampton address. It is an offence under that Act to fail to notify the licensing authority of a change of address. It is also an offence for the licensee not to notify the change of address of a DPS. Following the application for the review, the Director of Rockefellers Limited was changed from Mr. Priest to Mr. Tolvesa. It is the view of the licensing authority that from March 2020 until the view application was submitted, the premises was not in control of the licensee Rockefellers Limited. As far as we can ascertain, Mr. Priest has no licensing knowledge and had no involvement with the running of the business. The individual insolvency register extract indicates Mr. Taller is unemployed, stated as formerly being employed by Rockefellers Limited, bringing it into question whether there is actually a designated premises supervisor for the premises. The licensing authority would ask that the committee consider the following. It can be seen from the premises licence that the Aqua nightclub has some of the latest licensing hours in the town, closing times of 0200 hours Sunday to Wednesday, 0400 hours on Thursday, and 0600 hours on Friday and Saturday. It would therefore be the premises that people finish up at in Kettering's nighttime economy, and as such, its management needs to be of the highest standard. Instead, we have a company which changed its director from someone with licensing knowledge to someone with no licensing knowledge, and its designated premises supervisor, who by his own admission is no longer employed by the company, but appears to be involved in the running of the business. As a minimum, the committee may wish to consider if a condition on the licence require notification of any change in director, and that director must hold a personal licence, might be reasonable additions to the licence. Also, that the current designated premises supervisor be removed from the licence, as there are clearly discrepancies between Mr. Taller's activity and the information provided to a government body. For the committee's information, the premises is still closed as a requirement of coronavirus legislation. Excuse me. The committee must have regard to the authority's statement of licensing policy, the relevant legislation, and the National Section 182 guidance made under the Licensing Act 2003. Any decision of the licensing committee may be subject to appeal at a magistrates court. That concludes the report, Chair. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Hazel Webb. Right. Mr. Hobbs, are you going to be talking on behalf of the Aqua nightclub? This is your...
Mr. Hobbs, you need to unmute, sir.
Oh, you're muted. Mr. Hobbs.
Bottom left, usually.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Right, thank you.
That's better. Sorry about that. Yes, certainly. I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Aqua nightclub, and obviously, I think the committee members may have some questions of Dennis Todd-Svolver, bearing in mind he is the new director of Rockefellers Limited. I just want to give you some history in relation to this premises. This review comes about due to the nightclub opening in contravention of COVID regulations. But the real issue here is the control of the premises under the premises license holder, which is Rockefellers Limited. Now, previously Rockefellers Limited, the director there was a Mr. Dougal. Mr. Dougal then sold the company on, lock, stock and barrel, to Mr. Gentian Taller. And Mr. Gentian Taller was the director and sole director of Rockefellers Limited. The issue seems to be that COVID hit. It hit this particular premises very hard indeed. And Mr. Gentian Taller had a personal debt of somewhere around about £20,000 to £30,000. Now, this is where Mr. Priest comes in. Steve Priest was Mr. Taller's accountant in Corby. Now, Mr. Taller was advised by Mr. Priest as his accountant that he would be better off going into what's called a voluntary arrangement, whereby that debt could be written off. However, Mr. Priest clearly had no idea in relation to licensing law whatsoever, because Mr. Priest then volunteered himself to become director of the company, Rockefellers Limited, because Mr. Priest had advised Mr. Taller that he couldn't be director of a company and then enter into this voluntary agreement in order to resolve this debt. So Mr. Priest then took it upon himself to become the director with Mr. Taller's agreement. Mr. Taller had no idea that this was out of the unusual realms of what accountants do. My submission is that Mr. Priest, frankly, gave bad advice in these circumstances. Now, at this stage, when Mr. Priest became director of the company, obviously we were in lockdown at the time. Although Mr. Taller, who knows Dennis, who's also here today, they've known each other for about 10 years. They knew each other because they were both involved in the licensing trade. And Dennis runs a premises in Northampton called Stereo Bar. Now, Dennis wasn't sure how the business model worked for Aqua, but he was aware that Mr. Taller was the designated premises supervisor, and he was a personal license holder and still is, and also aware that Mr. Taller had the advanced DPS qualification, which is a requirement on this particular license. There is a condition there that the DPS must hold the advanced DPS qualification, which is quite an onerous qualification. It was sometime in June 2020 that Mr. Taller approached Dennis and asked if he wanted to join him in a business regarding Aqua, and Dennis agreed that he would be interested. They spoke about this, and there was an informal business relationship between them, although they couldn't do much at that stage because they were still in lockdown. They spoke about the prospects of this later on in July and spoke in more detail. Now, Dennis has a licensed premises stereo in Northampton, which used to open between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. And Dennis understood that Aqua operated between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. Now, due to the coronavirus, Dennis moderated his hours after the complete lockdown and operated his premises from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. And the police and council were fine with that, and he's still operating his premises to this day. That's obviously now limited to a 10 p.m. curfew in any event. Now, he was under the impression, Dennis was under the impression that a premises license is a premises license, which to a large extent is true. And there's no real distinction between a premises license opened until 4 a.m. and one opened until 6 a.m. It's a premises license. As Aqua had a license, there was a DPS in place, and Dennis's premises was allowed to open. He saw no problem with opening Aqua for limited hours as long as it operated within the guidelines. Now, it wasn't his intention to spread COVID and didn't want anyone attending not to be safe. And the way in which they operated the premises, Dennis explained this to Mr. Taller, was that they would only open the top bar, which is referred to as the Buddha bar. There'd be need for social distancing, limited numbers, and a booking system would be required, which they did through Facebook, as well as all the other precautions, such as no dancing, no loud music, and people sat at tables and table service. And that point is in fact confirmed by a letter, and it's in the committee committee notes. I think at page number 25, and that's the email from Dennis to Ross Howell at Kettering Borough Council, setting out what they were doing. The one thing, so effectively what they were doing, they were operating as a cocktail bar and not as a nightclub. The one thing that they failed to do was that they'd not notified the police or the council that they were operating and changing the operating schedule of the premises. Now, there are in the committee notes there pictures from Facebook of what looked like party scenes, and that type of activity that would be frowned upon by COVID regulations. They've clearly given the wrong impression there. Those pictures are from New Year's Eve parties last year. It wasn't the impression that they wanted to portray. And Dennis accepts that he should have checked the posts before they were put on by one of his employees. Now, when the premises was operating, it was safe and COVID compliant. It was only after Mr. Taller contacted Dennis and told him that there was a prohibition notice served that these two individuals contacted myself. And I advised them to cease activities immediately, which they were going to cease anyway because they'd been served with this notice. Now, Mr. Taller was still the DPS. His telephone number was the same. I've spoken to Mr. Taller. Mr. Taller tells me that he had not been contacted by telephone. And it's certainly the same number on the licence as I contacted Mr. Taller on. After consulting with myself, it materialised that Mr. Taller was no longer director, and it came to my notice that the accountant, Steve Priest, who had no licensing experience, which has been pointed out, was the director of the company. And this was done on the advice of Mr. Priest. I advised Mr. Taller that the main problem here was Mr. Priest, and he wasn't the right person to be a director of a company running a licensed premises where he had no licensing experience whatsoever. And it all became clear why the council could not contact Mr. Priest. The only contact I managed to get with Mr. Priest was an email when I explained that the license was in jeopardy. He sent me an email giving me permission to act on behalf of the company because I needed his permission because he was the director at that time. Since then, I've not been able to contact Mr. Priest at all, and I understand from rumours he's currently in the Bahamas. Certainly Mr. Taller has informed me that he's had other problems with this particular accountant, and he's not made certain tax returns in time for him, and it's cost him financial penalties with HM Revenue and Customs. So it was after the meeting that I advised them to remove Mr. Priest as the director of the company. Dennis became director of the company, which formalised the business agreement between them. Although Mr. Taller still holds shares in the company, okay, but he's not a director. And at this moment in time, he's not employed. The club isn't open. He's not employed. Obviously, that situation may well change because the premises have now consulted me in relation to the prospects of trying to change the operating schedule to change the premises more akin to a cocktail bar and other similar premises in Kettering that are operating. The problem that Aqua Nightclub have is the title name is Aqua Nightclub. Many other premises in Kettering operate as nightclubs. As far as Dennis was aware, Mr. Taller was also always contactable as DPS. No, I have had no problem with contacting him at all. And the premises was properly run, had doormen, fully trained staff were also on the premises. They were operating social distancing and all of the other guidance issued by the government in relation to COVID regulation. And it's my submission that the premises is now in control of the licensee Rockefellers Limited, having removed Steve Priest as the director. And frankly, after bad advice from him. The director's now Dennis, who is a license holder, is a personal license holder, and is better placed to understand running a licensed premises. And certainly so far as any crime and disorder is concerned, the police have raised no representations. There's no other representations from any of the other consulting bodies. And effectively, the club is not operating at the moment and will not operate until some kind of agreement is reached with the police and the council in relation to the operating schedule of this premises and the hours, which are, of course, limited at the moment under COVID regulations. Mr. Tolliver is more than willing for the council and the police to have contact details and will ensure that if there is a change of address or telephone numbers, he will inform the council and licensing officer and give an undertaking that if there's a change of directorship, both the licensing authority and the police will be notified. As you've already heard, there's no requirement in law to do this under the current legislation. But we'd invite that as a possible condition that the committee could consider to put on the licence to ensure that the premises licence is under the proper control of a proper director in charge of Rockefellers Limited. I would also add that this premises is in dire financial difficulties at the moment. It's continued to pay the rent on the premises that comes to £1,700 a month. There's been no allowance by the landlord in relation to that, and they're having to pay other overheads as well. So they're very much hoping that they can change the operating schedule and operate rather than the company effectively going bust. They're the representations on behalf of Rockefellers Limited for Aqua Nightclub. I'll invite any questions if you have any.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Hobbs. Right, Councillor Lee, have you some questions for Mr. Hobbs or Mr. Tolbasa? Are you muted?
Yep, thank you.
Oh.
I find it difficult to believe that someone who, well, it's a sorry account of management with a bad accountant and so on. It doesn't really inspire confidence that the club can be managed safely by people who are in another town or who don't have the right experience or who don't answer emails and letters that were served. So it doesn't really inspire confidence, the account that you've given, Mr. Hobbs. That's just my comment. So it's not really a question, I know. So I'll reserve that until later.
Right, okay. Right, thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Bundy?
Thank you,
You have
Chair.
some questions?
Yeah, so who exactly is the DPS at the moment?
The DPS at the moment is Genty and Taller.
But you've just told us that Mr. Taller has absolutely no control over the premises.
Well, yes, he does, because he's the designated premises supervisor.
So he's employed by Club Aqua still?
Well, no one's employed by Club Aqua at the moment because it's not operating.
Okay, so if Club Aqua were to open their doors under a different operating schedule, who would be the DPS?
Genty and Teller, because he'd be the best person placed as a designated premises supervisor, being the holder of the enhanced DPS qualification, which is a requirement on the licence. And that was put on by a previous committee because they felt that it did require a DPS with more experience than the usual, I have a premises a personal licence, therefore I can become a DPS.
So if Mr. Taller is going to be the DPS in the future, why did he not react to all the correspondence that was sent to him by Kettering Borough Council?
Well, Mr. Taller did, in conjunction with Dennis.
Eventually.
Well, the problem with Aqua is the premises only operates at the weekend, and if notice was served on the premises, at the premises, that probably wouldn't be picked up until the following weekend.
Sorry, I thought earlier in the submission we heard that the notice had actually been served on Mr. Taller as well.
The notice has been sent to Mr. Taller's address.
Right, so he wasn't
I
there.
understand it. I may have misunderstood that.
Hazel or Russ, can you comment, please?
Yeah, the notice was hand-delivered to the address that Northampton Borough Council hold for Mr. Taller in Northampton.
Okay, so Mr. Taller has, just bear with me, I'm just looking it up. So Mr. Taller has actually, well, he can't be a directive, he's because of his financial situation. So the only director of Rockefellers is Mr. Talvosa.
Yes.
And do you actually hold a premises license at all, or personal license, Mr. Talvosa? Sorry, you're on mute.
Need to unmute.
Need to unmute.
Yeah, hello.
Oh.
Yes, I have personal license as well. Yeah, because I'm running a place in Northampton.
Right. Right. Any further questions, Councillor Bundy?
Not at the moment.
Right, Councillor Lee. Any questions from Mrs. Walton Miller? No, no. Any further questions or comments from Hazel Webb or Russ Howell?
If I may, Chair, just a couple.
Yes.
I think Hazel's report has basically summed up where we were when this review application was submitted, and I think Mr. Hobbs has been quite open enough to confirm that what we suspected at the time was in fact correct in terms of the way the premises was being managed. Clearly there were some events organised in the summer that were organised by the DPS and Mr. Talvosa without, as far as I can tell, any involvement from Mr. Priest, who was the director of Rockefellers Limited. What I'm not sure we've quite clarified, and it's only a minor matter, is this submission of Mr. Taller to the financial people with regards to where he's living, and the honesty of that, because he's given a Kettering address, but clearly he still has some links with his Northampton address because that's where the prohibition notice was served, and he got that straight away, clearly because of the reaction that we got the following day, and that would have been delivered just after office hours on the day that it was delivered. So there are still some minor question marks over Mr. Taller's openness and honesty, I would suggest, to be a DPS. The only other thing I would ask, and it's information that came to me this morning, is that I understand that Mr. Telvesa had a fixed penalty notice served on him at the weekend for breach of COVID regulations at his Northampton premises, which again is a question about management, I suppose. That's me done, Chair. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Mr. Howell. Any further questions from Councillor
Chair,
Lee?
could I ask Mr. Telvesa, maybe through his representative, is that true? Did you have a notice served on you over the weekend for breach of COVID regulations?
Yes, certainly I can answer that, and I'm aware of that situation. There were a number of premises which were visited in Northampton over the last weekend. Officials from Northampton Borough Council visited the premises and found there were individuals congregating together. Obviously, the council decided to issue the £1,000 fine against the premises.
Can you explain what the breach was?
It was people congregating together in the premises, not keeping social distance, as I understand it, having spoken to Mr. Telvesa yesterday.
Would you like to say anything, Mr. Telvesa?
Hello.
Hello?
Yeah, so basically what's happened, so when visit Miss Louise Faulkner and Liz McCarthy, they find out so was few people were standing behind the DJ box, yeah, and doesn't keep social distancing, and basically they find me for that. So basically give me alert and fine £1,000 for that.
Can I ask another question, Chair?
Yes, of course, Councillor Bundy.
You say that they were behind the DJ box. So were you playing music?
No, it's background music. We're not doing live performances. It's only background music we have. It's low level music.
All I can say, Chair, is I've just been looking at I've just Googled Club Aqua Kettering, and the internet seems to be awash with photographs, videos, etc., of people attending and dancing at functions that appear to have been happening since March.
Sorry, Chair. I mean, if councillors are going to start introducing new evidence without pre-warning and looking stuff up on the internet, I really must object to that line.
I was just looking at the Facebook site of Club Aqua.
Well, I appreciate that, councillor, but you can't go off on an investigation of your own. This is effectively the same as a committee hearing that we would normally have.
Right, I believe that Councillor Lee wishes to have a question.
Yes, this is further to what was said during this meeting. The response, I'm sorry, Mr. Telvesa, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but your reply did not satisfy me because you seem to be blaming the customers. You do not seem to be taking responsibility. And every time what I've heard is just blame being shifted to an accountant or to customers rather than managers taking responsibility for their own business and fulfilling their statutory duties. So I have little confidence that you have the skills that you need to run these premises safely, which is a shame for Kettering's nighttime economy. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Lee. Right.
Can I just raise a point there? Sorry, Chair.
Yes, Mr.
In
Hobbs.
relation to that previous comment, that was an incident in relation to a matter in Northampton, in relation to a licensed premises in Northampton, and that matter has been dealt with. Okay. In relation to licensed premises, anyone who runs licensed premises or has been involved with licensed premises knows how difficult it is to maintain social distancing. Okay, you could have 50 staff on and you will still have problems with irresponsible customers congregating together. And it cannot be 100% the responsibility of the premises license holder. And I just want to make that point perfectly clear.
Right, thank you, Mr. Hobbs. Councillor Bundy, do you have a final question?
Can I ask why? Because surely every single everything that goes on in a licensed premise is the responsibility of that licensed premise manager or DPS. And if you can't run your premise in a way to prevent breaches of COVID-19 or other breaches of the licensing rules, surely you should not be running a premise in the first place.
Unless, of course, you have 50 staff to make sure that people are socially distancing all the time. You're not going to have staff pushing people apart when they come within 1.5 or 2 meters of each other.
Oh, can I add something for that case? So basically, on that Friday when they came to check me, there was a closed meeting for the students, and this is not my usual people. So because they know each other, and so basically they came from one university, so it was very difficult to stop to gathering them together. So this is my not usual people was. So usually when I have normal crowd, yeah, it's no problem to get them in the places and run them properly.
Right, thank you, Mr. Tolbesa. Thank you, Mr. Hobbs.
Thank you.
We will now have the committee meeting. So I ask, and with respect from Councillor Bundy and Councillor Lee and Mrs. Anne-Marie Walton-Miller, Mr. Howell, we will give a written answer to our discussions regarding Aqua Nightclub. Is that?
Yeah,
right,
if that's how you want to do it, Chair, then we
Yes.
can provide the
Well,
decision notice in writing.
Yes, we'll just. So we'll just have. So thank you, Mr. Hobbs. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Mr. Howell, Hazel Webb, and PC Brian.
Yep.
If you'd like to.
I'll leave the meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you,
leave the
Mr. Hobbs. Thank you,
meeting
Mr.
now. Thank
Tolbesa.
you.
Chair, Councillor Bundy, Councillor Lee and Anne-Marie, I've set up a separate room which you should have had on email, so we can do deliberations afterwards, just in case you wanted to do them and give a decision here and now. We have that option if you want to do that for the second
No, I
item.
think we'll give,
I shall bring Mr. Khalil in and we will start on item number 2, Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Khalil, can you hear us?
He's muted.
I know. He might be off making a cup of tea.
Hello, hello.
Here we go. We finished the first item, Mr. Khalil, so we're ready to start item 2. So
Okay, do you know if Mr. He was in the waiting room?
he is not. No.
Well, he did try to join the meeting. Am I okay to just give him a very quick call?
Yeah, feel free.
Give me 1 sec. Yeah, they're ready for us. Have you joined the meeting? You have joined it already?
Probably waiting in our waiting room, David.
Aha.
Oh,
Have you got him, David?
I believe so.
Okie dokie.
There's Mr. Hassan.
is it Mr. Hassan? Is it?
Yes, Mr. Hassan.
Excellent. Right then, Chair. I
Right.
think we've got everybody we need.
Right, good afternoon, Mr. Hassan, Mr. Khalil.
Afternoon.
Right, we're here to consider the application for review of the premises licence in relation to Almas Express. We're going to have the reports from Mr. Howell and PC David Bryan. So Mr. Howell first, thank you for your report.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just confirm with Mr. Khalil, the conversations we had earlier this week, is it still your intention to ask for an adjournment of this meeting, or are you happy to go ahead now?
No, I've managed to get hold of Mr. Hassan, so we're going to proceed. He's as you can see, he's there. So yeah.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. So, Chair, we're here this afternoon to consider an application for review from Northamptonshire Police with regards to the Almas Express premises licence located in Montague Street, Kettering. A copy of PC Bryan's review application is enclosed in the papers with all the supporting documentation that he had in terms of witness statements, etc., to support the review. The application's been up for 28 days for consultation, as we do with all of our applications. As required by the legislation, no other representations have been received. So a copy of the current licence is attached with the papers. A copy of a plan showing where the premises is in Kettering Town Centre is enclosed with the papers also. This review has been called by Northamptonshire Police based on a history at this premises of issues by various enforcement agencies where they've visited the premises on a number of occasions, resulting in the discovery of quantities of duty not paid alcohol, illegal tobacco products, and there was also an occurrence of an illegal worker on the premises. PC Bryan has kindly worded the Section 182 guidance in his application for me with regards to these type of offences, in that the sale and storage of smuggled tobacco and alcohol are to be considered by a committee as particularly serious matters, and revocation should be seriously considered in the first instance. Since preparing the committee report and conversations with Mr. Khalil earlier this week, I am led to believe that the business may have changed hands, which I'm sure Mr. Khalil will confirm in his submission. Although to date, no transfer application for the licence has actually been received. So at the moment, the licence is still in the name of Mr. Hassan, and Mr. Hassan is still the DPS for the premises. That's the report, Chair.
Right, thank you, Mr. Howe. Right, Police Constable David Bryan, please. I'd like to add to your written report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, councillors. I take it you can hear me.
Yeah,
Yep.
very quietly.
I'd just like to go through,
That's better.
basically go through the statement at page 72, which is a summary of the review papers. So as you can see, at point 1, we had an incident in August 2018 where HMRC and trading standards officers and the police attended with a tobacco detection dog. Mr. Langford, a trading standards officer, was liaised with. He identified himself when he walked into the shop, and he was prevented from entering the rear area of the storeroom by a staff member. Say no physical force was used, but he was impeded. It's suspected that this gave enough time for what was suspected to be tobacco products to be taken from the rear of the property. You will notice that there are some photographs in your pack at page 92. But as I said, I think they've come out in black and white in your pack. They were submitted in colour, but what they are fruit juice cartons that have been emptied, and some hand rolling tobacco, which was a duty not paid, have been stuffed inside the cartons. These were discovered on a storage shelf, a storage rack, and there was quite a lot of these fruit juice products. So that was that visit, and as you can see, only 0.6 kilograms of hand rolling tobacco was seized on that occasion. And then there's an email sent on the 20th of September 2018 to myself and other members of my team from Ms. Gamble at Trading Standards, detailing a summary of visits conducted on the 14th of August. And I've redacted other premises, but obviously I've left Alma's there. Point 2 is when HMRC officers visited on the 7th of February 2020 and seized 983 litres of alcohol. You will see that there's a redacted intelligence report confirming this sent to Northamptonshire Police. I liaised with HMRC and I was instructed that they were given 45 days to appeal that, and there should be in your pack an email from Officer Joseph Bryan, the senior officer, stating that that appeal has not been made. So the alcohol has been forfeited. Again, we've got a visit on the 6th of February 2020, a joint visit. That details an illegal worker. You will notice that there will be an email from the Immigration Service confirming that this person had no right to work. And the DPS at the time was Mr. Hiwa Mohammed Hassan. Point 3 details a test purchase conducted by Northamptonshire Police by a plainclothes officer on the 14th of March this year, where a packet of duty not paid cigarettes were purchased by PC Alex Richards. There should be a statement detailing that. And again, a test purchase was made by Northamptonshire Police on the 26th of May by PC Sandy Tracy, where she also managed to purchase a packet of duty not paid illicit cigarettes. You will also find 2 statements from Officer Rachel Bennett from Trading Standards, detailing traders' notices and seizures and the test purchase that they've conducted. I requested that from Trading Standards. You can put what weight you wish to that statement. They're not here to represent it themselves, but it's in the review papers that I've submitted. And then you'll also find 3 letters from the Medical Health Regulatory Authority in relation to prescription drugs being found inside the store. Now, although that would not normally be a licensing matter in its entirety, I've included it because I was involved in some of this, and it is an indication of non-compliance with regulatory authorities. You can put whatever weight you wish, or none at all, to those documents. And then you will find a landlord's letter which was sent by Trading Standards to the landlord of Alma Express, detailing the activity that they were discovering on the premises, and the reply from the landlord's solicitors. Of note, it's in relation to Mr. Kadir, who was the DPS at the time of the application. Mr. Kadir has changed his name to Mr. Hassan. And you will notice that more recent visits, Mr. Hassan is listed as the DPS. In essence, that's my submission at this time. Clearly, I'll happily take questions, but I'm not sure I can add any more to what I've already submitted to you. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, PC Brian. Right, Mr. Khalil or Mr. Hassan, who's going to speak first, please?
With myself. Just a couple of questions for PC Brian. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay, Mr. Brian, you know when the illicit tobacco, when the test purchases were carried out in March and May of this year, were further checks carried out at the premises to see if there was any illicit tobacco found there?
No searches were made after that. They were just test purchases.
Okay. Yeah, that was all I wanted to know. That's the only question I have for you.
Right, okay. Mr. Hassan, do you wish to speak now on the...
No, I'm going to be speaking on his behalf. That was just a question for Mr. Brian. Before I do continue, I'm not really familiar with this. So once I've stated his, position, do we then have a closing opportunity to close, or is it not like that?
This is your opportunity to give your side.
Yeah, but then following that, is there a closing? Because when I was looking at the papers, it says following that there's questions, and then I'll have a chance for a closing.
Well, there'll be some questions probably from Councillor Lee and perhaps Councillor Bundy. There might be a question from myself, might be a question from our legal representative.
Through you, Chair, all parties do have the
Right.
opportunity to for
That's right.
final summation before.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so I'll put forward his case. Then Mr. Hassan will take any questions, and then I'll do the closing if that's okay.
Yeah.
So 182 guidance states that the licensing authority must arrange for a hearing where issues can be considered and both parties put forward their arguments. You've heard the applicant. They put forward their grounds. They put forward an application, and it's for the prevention of crime and disorder. I'll go through Mr. Hassan's case by going through each of the points as outlined in the application. Before doing so, as you've heard by Mr. Howell, that Mr. Hassan has actually sold the premises to Euro Express Catering Limited. I did do a company's house search on that. It was a Mr. Soran something. Unfortunately, I didn't take note of his surname. However, Mr. Hassan will remain employed at the premises as the DPS. So it is relevant to him. If the license is revoked, he's going to lose between £12,500 to £15,000, as Euro Express will not pay the full amount of money, as it's not a licensed store. I'll just initially start with the medicine. You've heard from Mr. PC Brian. These aren't relevant to the licensing. He said that you don't have to attach any weight to the medication, and I ask you not to do so. But what I will say, it shows Mr. Hassan's naivety in that when he was when he was questioned about the medicine, he made full admission. He said, "I bought them online and I was selling them in my shop. I didn't know I wasn't allowed to do that. I'll stop immediately." It's as simple as that. Moving on to the more serious allegations, the ones in the application then. The first one on the 14th of August 2018. You've heard that a very small amount of hand rolling tobacco, 0.6 kg, was found. A tobacco detention dog was released. There was an extensive search of the storerooms using the dog, and this is when the small amount of tobacco was found. Mr. Hassan was at the premises, and he tells me that he actually informed the officers that this tobacco must have been left behind from a previous occasion in 2017. I believe in 2017, whilst there was a previous guy with Mr. Hassan, some tobacco was found, and this small amount was overlooked. The officer, Mr. Hassan, informed me that the officer, he'd make a note of this, no further action would be taken. However, this has not been included in the application. In my submission, it's a fair account of what could have happened, which explains why there was such a small amount of tobacco. The second issue, which was on the 7th of February 2020, which was the alcohol that was seized. Now, I've read the emails between PC Brian and the people who seized the alcohol. Now, what's important to note that on the 6th of February, so the day before, there was a joint visit by HMRC, the police, and Trading Standards. So surely on this day, on the 6th of February, they would have come, they would have been looking for illicit cigarettes or illicit tobacco and other things. They didn't find anything. There wasn't anything there. It was the following day that HMRC went back to get the alcohol. Now, if this alcohol was illegal or the duty had not been paid, as is being alleged, knowing that there'd been a joint visit the day before, surely Mr. Hassan would have attempted to remove it from the premises or conceal it. No evidence has been provided that the duty is not paid. The only thing that's being relied upon that this alcohol, the duty might not have been paid, is because Mr. Hassan didn't make an appeal to get the alcohol back. When I asked Mr. Hassan why he didn't appeal it, he said he didn't know he could, he didn't know the procedure, and English isn't his best language. He said, had he known he could have appealed it, he would have done so. So please remember, when making your decision today about the license, there's no evidence that this alcohol was in fact illegal or duty hadn't been paid. It says it was just suspected. I mean, moving forward, you'll be aware, after today's hearing, there's a number of options available to you instead of revoking the license. I suggest that maybe a condition could be added onto the license, that Mr. Hassan must have a record and keep all invoices of all the alcohol that he sells in his shop. And this should be available for inspection immediately if the HMRC, the police, or Trading Standards want to see it. So it should be there straight away. That's what I would suggest in relation to this point. Moving on to points 3 and 4, I will deal with these together. Now, these are test purchases carried out at the premises. Now, in support of the test purchase, on the 14th of March, as correctly stated by Mr. Bryan or PC Bryan, there's a statement at page 87 by Alex Richards. Unfortunately, most of that statement has been redacted and a lot of it's deleted out. It doesn't give you the circumstances around the actual sale and who sold the cigarettes. Mr. Hassan is unable to provide his comments on this due to the lack of information. Now, in relation to the other test purchase on the 26th of May 2020, there's further information, including a description of the person who sold the cigarettes. It says, it was a light-skinned Arabic male in his 20s with black hair and a beard. This was not Mr. Hassan, and it is in fact one of his staff members who've been selling these behind Mr. Hassan's back. Mr. Hassan says that during this period and due to the pandemic, it was almost impossible to keep an eye on everything that was going on at the store. There were changes he had to make, such as social distancing, which the officer does mention in her statement at the test purchase. She says, oh, there was social distancing in place, so she couldn't hear what was going on completely. So, you know, he had to follow guidelines from the government that were being introduced. He also advised that there'd been a number of other occasions where HMRC, Trading Standards, and the police have come to his shop, searches were carried out, but nothing was found. Like on the occasion on the 6th of February, no illicit tobacco was found. Mr. Hassan further informs me, had he been made aware of these illicit tobacco sales at a sooner date, he would have checked his CCT, which only records for a period of 30 days. He would have made inquiries at the time, provided information to the police because it's got nothing to do with him. I asked Mr. Bryan if, you know, when the illicit tobacco was, when the test purchases were carried out, why weren't there any checks, or was there any checks? He said, no, there wasn't any checks. Mr. Hassan believes, had there been checks, this would have shown that the individuals responsible for the sales would have been selling these cigarettes for a personal gain and nothing would have been found at his shop. Also, and more importantly, Mr. Hassan has asked me to inform you that throughout this pandemic, for a period of 4 months, he wasn't fully involved in the shop like he was prior to the pandemic. He wasn't there on a daily basis. He would only go there to make sure everything was compliant, to make sure his staff were there, make sure stock was there, but he wasn't working there on a full-time basis. In relation to the illegal worker, moving on to the next point, again, I've had a look at the emails sent between Mr. Bryan and the person who's informed him that the worker had no rights. But I'm a bit confused about this, and maybe Mr. Bryan will be able to help me with this. But in response to Mr. Bryan's email, I think it's on page 71, it just states, you know, PC Brian's asking if he was allowed to work and if you have information. And it says, "Hi David, with his current bail restrictions, work is prohibited." Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know if the worker had committed a crime and was on bail or if he was illegal in the UK. I mean, I've not had much information, but Mr. Hassan says he doesn't know anything about any illegal workers. And if it was due to bail conditions, then this could have easily been concealed. But on his payroll, on his accountant, there's nothing to suggest any illegal workers. That's me done with my submissions. I would like to have the opportunity for the closing, but I'm sure there's going to be questions for Mr. Hassan or for myself, which we're happy to address at this point.
Right, thank you, Mr. Khalil. Right, Councillor Lee, do you have some questions for Mr. Khalil or for Mr. Hassan?
Can I ask one of our officers something about to verify what has just been claimed? I will have questions for Mr. Khalil, but just to check the facts, am I allowed to ask you, Russ, whether you can tell from alcohol whether the duty has been paid or not? Because I should think it's quite obvious from alcohol whether the duty is paid or not. But can you please, I'm not a professional as you are, so can I check that with you, please?
I'll take that comment, Chair. But I'm sure PC Brian can advise more than that. It's not something that I have knowledge of. It's normally a trading standards matter or HMRC matter, but experience of test purchasing may have more experience on that in that field.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, Chair, should I direct my question then to PC Brian? And I apologize to PC Brian that I didn't ask him in the first place.
PC Brian?
Yeah, hello, Councillor. Yes, from what I know from working with HMRC and in licensing in the police is each wholesaler for alcohol has to have a HMRC code, and each retail outlet can only buy alcohol from a cash and carry, for want of a better word, a wholesaler that is registered with Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. And clearly, if you purchase alcohol from those outlets, you should be given invoices. Now, all I can say is the alcohol was seized. I do know why they went back the next day, and Mr. Khalil is at a disadvantage there. I do know the reasons why, but didn't think it would be pertinent for the papers. But effectively, when the alcohol is seized, I've been with HMRC, they leave paperwork detailing how the seizure can be appealed, and that there's 45 days to appeal it. Now, I would suggest that the way that is appealed is by producing invoices to verify that the alcohol has been purchased legally. I can't comment why it wasn't appealed. I'm just saying it wasn't appealed. I hope that helps a bit more.
Right. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bundy?
Yeah, can I just clarify, what were the dates of that particular time when the HMRC went back the second day?
So they visited on the 6th.
The 6th of what?
February, sorry.
This year?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, as I said, it's Mr. Khalil is a little bit of a disadvantage, but basically the officers didn't seize the alcohol on the 6th. They should have done, and they were instructed by their senior officer, Mr. Joseph Bryan, to return the following day to seize it. But in fairness to Mr. Khalil, he would not have known that because it wasn't in the papers. I didn't think it was that pertinent, but because Mr. Khalil has raised the question, clearly I need to clarify that.
No, it just seems very strange that Mr. Khalil used as an excuse for tobacco being found, that it had been there for a long time and not found.
Sorry, I thought we were talking about the alcohol.
Well, I'm talking about both, because if if we've got a situation where things have been left there for a long time, therefore, and they weren't noticed, but then we're being told that there's other times when they should have noticed things. I just think it's very
No,
strange.
what I was saying, I read in the papers as well somewhere. I think there was in 2017, towards the end of 2017, there was a search of the premises where illicit tobacco was found. Now that's not to do, I don't think that's to do with the DPS, which is why it's not included in these papers. So what I'm saying is because the illicit tobacco was found on the 14th of August 2018, not in February 2020. So that was a short period after the initial cigarettes were found. So it was such a small amount, 0.6 kilograms, and the way that you've seen how they were concealed in them cartons, they would not be visible to the normal eye. It took a even though an extensive search was carried out, it took the dog to find the tobacco. So if there was going to be more tobacco on that day, on the 14th of August, I mean, I know from previous cases, and I'm sure you do, the dog, nothing can get past that dog. When, people have illicit cigarettes in all sorts of, hides and concealments, etc., the dog always finds it. So the fact that there's only 0.6 kilograms, it's not an excuse. I'm just, telling you what I've been told. And I think it's a fair account, but that's just my submission. Obviously, you may have a different opinion to that. So,
okay. Can I carry on asking questions, Jeff?
Yes, of course.
Your comment about the fact that Mr. Hassan wasn't on the premises very much. If he's the designated premises supervisor, surely he's responsible for everything that goes on those premises, and he's the person legally responsible, and he's the go-to person for the police and other authorities. So it's not really a defence, is it, that, oh, he wasn't there, because he was still responsible?
no, of course, I agree with you 100%. And what I said was that it was due to the pandemic. When I asked why he wasn't there, maybe you should direct this question towards him, because when I asked why he wasn't there as often, he said because between March and for the first few months following March, with the coronavirus pandemic, nobody knew what coronavirus was. Everybody was on severe lockdown. So people, if he didn't feel comfortable going into his shop every day in fear of getting the virus and dying, I understand what you say. Yeah, he should be there, but his defense is he didn't want to die.
So he employed somebody else to be there on his behalf?
No, he was there. I didn't say he wasn't there for 4 months. I said he wasn't there as much. I said he went in to make sure everything was okay. He went to make sure the staff was accurate. He made sure that the store was being compliant. I said all of this. I didn't say he was not there for 4 months. But as I said, you can clarify that with him.
Okay. You say that the shop has been sold to Euro Express now?
Yes.
Do they own any other premises in Kettering?
Company's House didn't show anything when I checked, but maybe Mr. Hassan can help me with that, because I don't know much about the sale. All I know is that he sold it and he's going to be employed. And I think the director was Mr. Soran something, but maybe Mr. Hassan will be able to help you with that. Mr. Hassan?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mr. Hassan?
Need
I think
to
he's
unmute
muted.
Hassan.
Mr. Hassan?
You're muted.
I think he might. Has he muted himself?
There you go.
Oh, okay.
Do you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Yes. It's, we understand that you've now sold the, whatever it is, to, what was it, Euro
Express.
Euro Express.
Alma Express.
No. You know the company that you sold it to?
You've sold it to a company called Euro Express?
No, it's Euro Plus.
Euro Plus, all right.
Oh, sorry, that's my mistake.
Yeah, it's all right.
And
Right.
what's the name of the new owner?
Soran Ahmed.
So the question, Mr. Hassan, was, does Mr. Ahmed have any other shops?
I don't think so.
Right. Right. Councillor Lee?
Yes. Well, the defense arguments you have used to me sound quite staggering. That, as Councillor Bundy already said, that there was a little bit left or illegal tobacco left from before, that it was only a little bit, that illegal goods were not found during every search. You've blamed Mr. Khalil or Mr. Hassan's naivety, the fact he doesn't speak English. I'm afraid, in my view, all it shows is that really there's no respect for the law. There is every instance shows that there is a feeling that the law does not apply to this particular shop or this particular shopkeeper, and this difference of 15,000 because the shop.
Sorry, what's your question?
Yes, what's your question?
Well, don't you think that the law applies to Alma Express, and that if the law is broken, that the law needs to be enforced to the benefit of all the other honest shopkeepers in Kettering?
Of course, I agree with you. Yes, but the fact that, look, have you read the application?
Yes.
Have you looked at the pictures?
Yes.
Have you seen how that 0.6 kilogram of tobacco was concealed in a carton of juice? Did you see that?
Yes, but something
Right.
concealed in a carton to me shows dishonesty.
Of course, but I'm not saying it's not dishonest, but that was from a so the account I was given to that was that it was a previous occasion, right? Because it was such a small amount and it was concealed in a carton of juice, which I don't know, because my pictures are black and white, but you can still tell. I just don't think it would be very easily found. So you've said that it shows dishonesty and a failure to the law, etc., etc. I'm just trying to give you an account on that occasion as to why such a small amount was found. You know, one would expect if they were going to be concealed like this, that there would be lots and lots. Like, for example, Mr. Brian has said that, you know, he's included in this the report containing cigarettes that were found on the 18th of February. I can't find the page like this, but some of the other shops, they had far more cigarettes. You know, they had hundreds and hundreds of cigarettes. This was 0.6 kilograms. He's saying, I didn't know about it. That for me sounds viable. I mean, I don't know why. You may have different opinion, but that's a matter for you. That's fine. I'll just have a look if I can find it.
It's all right. It's all right. We clearly have very different viewpoints, and there's a long list here of times when irregularities were found. So it doesn't come down to just one incident. There is the alcohol. There is a lot more.
Right. Okay.
Like I said, the alcohol. Mr. Bryan's answered your question, the question that you had. You know, just because he couldn't provide the invoices or he didn't provide them on that day or within 45 days doesn't mean it's illegal.
Right. Do you wish to do a final conclusion then, Mr. Khalil, for us?
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
So I've been involved with, and I'm sure that you've heard far more serious cases where premises have been found with a lot more cigarettes, smuggled tobacco, illegal alcohol, yet the license wasn't revoked. They were either given conditions or a small suspension. And normally you find stores have other breaches like inadequate CCTV signs, staff not being trained, sales to minors, etc. The fact that none of this has been mentioned support that the conditions are in fact being promoted. In relation to the law, and you know, as the councillor said, that law is not being followed. Well, in fact, when the government suggested social distancing, this shop took immediate action and social distancing was implied. As outlined in the paperwork, when Mr. Hassan changed his name, he followed the law, he followed the council's guidelines, and he informed the license, I've changed my name, update my license so it reflects this. These are examples that he does follow law and conditions. Moving on to the breaches, are these enough to revoke the license? In my submission, no. I've explained about the alcohol and the 0.6 kg of tobacco. I've explained the 2 test purchases, no illicit tobacco was found, but that people were going behind his back. Chair, the Licensing Act and the review guidelines, they give you a number of options in relation to breaches where you can review a premises license. I submit that they give you so many options because there's lots of different cases. And in some occasions, you'll get cases like this one, a very small case where in my submission, minor breaches. 11.17 of the 182 guidance states, the licensing authority may decide that the review does not require it to take any further steps to promote the licensing objectives. In addition, there's nothing to prevent an authority issuing an informal warning and to recommend improvement within a particular period of time. Now, if you were to do this with Mr. Hassan, this review hearing is a massive warning to him. If he doesn't comply with the licensing conditions, he will lose his license. He will lose this shop. The guidelines specifically tell you that's all you need to do. If you feel like a warning isn't sufficient, then one of the other options 182 guidance gives you is modify the conditions on his license. And in my submission, keep an account of all the alcohol and the invoices. They must be kept at the shop readily available. In relation to some personal information about Mr. Hassan, he's came to this country alone due to the war in his country without any family. He's got no qualifications. His English isn't the best. He's worked in factories for many years in order to accumulate savings to open his own shop and be his own boss. The premises in question, he advises me, the majority of the profit comes from alcohol. If he was to lose this license, he won't be able to sell the premises for its true value. He's going to lose a lot of money. And he actually thinks that this shop will struggle to remain open, not be able to pay rent and rates. Throughout this difficult period, he's continued to carry on paying rent. Mr. Soran, he employs staff, Mr. Hassan employs staff and he pays wages for them, supporting their family. If the license is lost, Mr. Soran will not pay the full agreed amount for this shop. And, you know, ultimately, Mr. Hassan will be on benefits, relying on the government for money, which he doesn't want to do. I invite you then to follow the guidelines. I mean, what's going to happen if you revoke this license today? Mr. Hassan and all the people working with him, they're going to suffer, as well as the wider community of Kettering. What's going to happen if you give him a warning or add conditions? Nothing will happen. Will you be able to revoke this license in the future? Yes. Can you review the license again? Yes. Is there going to be further checks, compliance checks from HMRC trading standards? Yes. Now, especially in this uncertain time where stores are needed the most, I ask you to consider the impact on the wider community. Now, these stores are needed, especially those that are licensed. They provide everyday household goods, and more importantly, they provide licensed goods. People returning home, they have to be home for 10 o'clock. Pubs are closed, clubs are closed. You know, there's a lot more people, you know, buying alcohol from premises such as this one. I ask you to consider the impact it will have on them. Where so many people have lost their jobs and struggling to find employment, I ask you to give Mr. Hassan just one chance to carry on working and for all his staff members to carry on working, a chance to prove that he can promote these conditions, a chance to show that these are all mistakes which were beyond his control. You know, I appreciate that you have concerns about this premises, and rightly so. Maybe Mr. Hassan could have done more. I just want to finish off by saying that, look, it's a very difficult time that it's got to a stage where we're doing Zoom calls, you know, in this kind of environment. It's important to give people a chance, give people an opportunity to run their life as normal as possible, a chance to have a positive outlook in a period of uncertainty. You know, that's all I'm asking. I'm asking, and I'm not asking, you know, for anything extraordinary. These are all in the guidelines. Everything I'm saying is in section 182 guidance, and you can review all this, you know. So therefore, I ask, in a normal situation, if you felt one more thing. In the application, it says 11.28, where it says criminal activity, revocation should be seriously considered. It says it should be seriously considered. No, it doesn't mean you have to do that. So therefore, in a normal situation, if you feel like you would revoke this license, I would ask you in this period, this very difficult period, just to give him one chance to prove that he can do this. And it's not going to prevent in the future the license being revoked if the conditions are not being followed. That's me finished. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Mr. Khalil. Thank you, Mr. Hassan. The committee will come to a decision, and it will be sent to you in writing.
Chair, sorry,
thank you very much,
Chair, we'd like to PC Brian.
PC Brian, you wish to say something?
Just a couple of questions for Mr. Hassan before we finish. Thank you, Chair. Did we know when the sale took place? When he sold the business?
Pardon?
When did you sell your business?
Last week, around 15 or 16 of October.
15th of October.
Yeah, around. Actually, I can't remember 100%, but around 14, 15. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then can I just ask, why did you change your name by deed?
I just like this name. It doesn't mean if I'm gonna change my name, I can't run away of rules because I am still the person. I live in UK. I just like this name. That all.
Okay, you like the name. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. That's.
Thank
I haven't
you.
got any further questions.
Right.
Okay,
Thank you.
so in relation to the decision then, I think Russ has my email address because we've been emailing. Will you just email me on that, the decision, or how does it work? I don't really know.
Through you, Chair.
Yes,
Russ, did you wanna-
that's right, yes. Mr. Howell, if we will do a written decision, and that will be sent, what, by mail to Mr. Khalil and Mr. Hassan?
I can email it, and if Mr. Khalil wants to give me his address, we'll give a written copy as well.
Nah, the email's fine, if
Okay.
that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, right, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you for your time.
Khalil,
you.
Mr. Hassan.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Right,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye.
Brian.
Members, if you can sit tight for me, thank you. Thank you, PC Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care, everyone.
Right, Chair. Might be an idea to announce that we've reached the end of the public side of the
Yes,
meeting.
that's right. The licensing committee has reached the end of the listening to the reports this afternoon. And this is the end of the public